All right, we've been, we started talking about this several months ago. If you're an independent freight dispatcher, you need to pay attention to this. If you've been thinking about getting out of the independent dispatcher business, going it out there on your own as a freight broker or freight broker agent, now might be the time to start taking it serious. A few months ago, we told you that the FMCSA, or the subject was brought up about independent dispatch services. Well, now the FMCSA, they're wanting feedback, and I don't know why, wanting feedback regarding the definitions of a broker and a bona fide agent or a dispatch agent. Now, what's this mean? Well, the FMCSA is scheduled. Well, they scheduled the or they published rather a notice to the Federal Registry yesterday. Yesterday being Friday, June 10th, to inform future guidance as instructed by the infrastructure law passed in 2021. The agency must issue guidance to clarify the definition by November 15th. That was back a year ago we started talking about this. I don't know how they're going to figure this out, but actually I don't know what I really don't understand why of all the organizations that the FMCSA would have to ask the difference between an agent and a freight broker. The guidance must take into consideration the extent to which technology has changed the nature of freight brokering, the role of bona fide agents, and other aspects of the freight transportation industry. Once the notice is published in the Federal Register, which was yesterday, public will have 30 days to comment. The FMCSA's guidance must examine the role of a dispatch service in the transportation industry. So this isn't, even though they're saying bona fide agents, it's obvious they're talking about dispatch, independent dispatch services. That's pretty much what they're looking at. FMCSA's guidance must examine the role of a dispatch service in the transportation industry, examine the extent to which dispatch services could be considered brokers or bona fide agents. Anytime I say that word bona fide, I think back to, oh brother, where art thou? He's bona fide. He's bona fide. Anyway, and clarify the level of financial penalties for unauthorized brokerage activities under 49 U.S.C. 14916 applicable to a dispatch service. If you're a independent dispatch service, they're knocking at the door. You better be listening. As part of the comments, the agency wants industry stakeholders to respond to 13 questions. Number one, what evaluation criteria should FMCSA use when determining whether a business model or entity meets the definition of a broker? Provide examples of operations that meet the definitions of a broker, 49 CFR 371.2, and examples of operations that do not meet the definition in 49 CFR 371.2. Question number 3, what role should the possession of money exchanged between shippers and motor carriers in a broker transaction play in determining whether one is conducting a brokerage or not? Number 4, how would you define the term dispatch service? Is there a commonly accepted definition? What role do dispatch services play in the transportation industry? That's 2 questions, but that's 3 questions, but it's built into one. Number 5, to the best of your knowledge, do dispatch services need to obtain a business license or employer identification number from the state in which they primarily conduct business? Number 6, what should FMCSA consider when determining if a dispatch service needs to obtain broker operating authority? You see all these questions, it's all about independent dispatch services. Number 7, if a dispatch service represents more than one carrier, does this in and of itself make it a broker operating without authority? Uh-oh. When should a dispatch service be considered a bona fide agent? What role do bona fide agents play in the transportation of freight? Number 10, electronic bulletin boards match shippers and carriers for a fee. The fee is a membership fee to have access to the bulletin board information. Should electronic bulletin boards be considered brokers, are required to register with FMCSA to obtain broker operating authority? If so, when and why? That kind of sounds like going after those bid boards. U-ship, things like that. We'll see. Question number 11. How has technology changed the nature of freight brokering? And how should these changes be reflected, if at all, in FMCSA's guidance? Question number 12. Are there other business models or services other than dispatch services and electronic bulletin boards that should be considered when clarifying the definition of a broker? And question number 13, are there other aspects of the freight transportation industry that FMCSA should consider in issuing guidance pertaining to the definition of a broker or a bona fide agent? Those are the 13 questions. Some of these questions have 2 or 3 questions built in, but those are the questions the FMCSA is wanting answered if you decide to make a comment. Now, if you are an independent dispatcher, that's fine. Personally, I think it goes back to, I think if they pass something like this, there's going to be lawsuits at the yin-yang from, bigger independent dispatch services. Because an independent dispatcher is an independent contractor when it comes right down to it. Trucking company contracts the independent dispatcher to work under their license via that contract. With that contract in place, the dispatcher has authority from the trucking company to work under their authority to get loads for that trucking company. Now, here's where a lot of the problem comes. These independent dispatch services, they don't have their own customers. Well, they can't have their own customers because, well, they're not licensed. Now, if they're working under a carrier's authority, yes, they are licensed to get loads for that trucking company. But the loads or the customers they procure for that trucking company, they can only put those loads on that trucking company's truck. See what I mean? They can't go out here and pick up 10 customers legally and put those loads on whoever they want that they may have a contract with. You see what I mean? So there's kind of a gray area there. But okay, to be honest, though, let's be honest about this. What's happening with these dispatch services? Most of these dispatch services are doing it because they see it's an easy buck, or they think it is. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, they understand that, hey, if I can work as an independent dispatcher for a trucking company, work under their license, I don't have to go out here and find my own customers. I can go to the load board. I can get loads for these trucks from a broker, and I'll still make money off of them. So that presents a problem in itself. And if you're a trucking company using a dispatch service, you should have already figured this out on your own. That if you're using a dispatch service, okay, they're getting loads off the load board from a broker. You should know that, because when you get paid for the load, or when you invoice, you're invoicing the broker for that load. You're going to be paid by the broker. You know it's a brokered load. And now you're paying the dispatch service on top of that, so the broker's getting a commission, which they should. And then the dispatch service, you're having to pay them just for looking at the load board and making a phone call. Pretty much it. Now, I'm not saying dispatch services don't have a place. I really believe they do. But I think a trucking company should understand that, a real dispatch service will have their own customers. You're not going to get double dipped. The advantage of a trucking company using a dispatch service would be to be able to have an independent agent working for you that is working on your behalf to procure customers of which you can obtain direct freight. Not to sit on their rear end looking at the load board, taking loads off the load board, putting it on your truck. I mean, when it's all said and done, you're paying 20, 25, 30% for that load. If you would have got on the phone yourself, you could have saved yourself, 10% maybe? Something like that. Anyway, we talked about this a few months ago, that knocking was at the door. Independent dispatch services could be, they've been put on notice now. They're on notice. Now, if you are an independent dispatch service, what you may want to consider doing is changing your operation. Instead of being a dispatch service, just using the load board to get loads to put on trucks, you need to think about becoming a broker, either under your own authority or start out as an agent. The reason is you're going to be covered under that license, and what it's going to allow you to do is work with any trucking company. Now, granted, you're going to have to go out here and get your own customers, but believe me, getting customers as a broker is not difficult. It's not difficult at all. You got to make the calls. You got to make a lot of them. Just like I tell my clients, you've got to be willing to sit down and make a lot of phone calls. And even in the mentorship program at TALTOA, the freight broker agents that are just starting out as an agent in the mentorship program, they should be focused on building their customer base, not on trying to move freight. If you don't have a customer base, you're not going to have any loads. Without loads, you're not going to be able to make money. And the only way you're going to have loads is by having customers. And how do you get customers? You make sales calls. And the sales calls are easy. They're really simple. If you have an independent dispatch service and you're wanting to you're thinking about either getting your broker license or want to, start out as an agent, and you've only been working the load boards and you're not really sure. And we get calls all the time at TALTOA. Yeah, I've been a dispatcher for blah, 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 long time, and I know the industry. And then they get into brokering, they find out they didn't know quite as much as they thought they did. And that's because they've been working load boards all the time. They've been working a load board from the trucking company's perspective. But at the same time, what they're trying to do is make more money for themselves, but not really understanding how a broker operation works, getting customers, calling your loads, things of that nature. There's a lot to learn. Brokering freight's not difficult, just has a lot of details.